The stage was silent as the lights dimmed, and a single spotlight illuminated the small figure at the center. 13-year-old Lila stood there, clutching the microphone with trembling hands. Her heart pounded, not from fear of the crowd, but from the weight of the promise she had made. She had told her parents that tonight, she would sing for them, not just as their daughter, but as a child of faith who wanted her voice to be a gift to Jesus. Her parents sat in the audience, their faces full of quiet pride, their eyes glistening as they watched the little girl they had once rocked to sleep now standing in front of hundreds. The murmurs of the crowd faded into silence as she took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let the first note escape her lips. It was fragile at first, soft and trembling like a prayer whispered in the dark. But with each passing moment, her voice grew stronger, clearer, rising higher until it seemed to fill every corner of the room. The audience sat frozen, many holding their breath, some with tears streaming down their cheeks. There was something about the purity of her tone, something about the way her small body carried such a powerful spirit, that struck the heart like a revelation. She wasn't just singing, she was pouring out her soul, every word carrying gratitude for her parents, every note lifting toward heaven like a message only faith could deliver. The longer she sang, the less the audience saw a little girl and the more they felt they were witnessing a miracle, a glimpse of innocence turned into something eternal. By the time her voice reached the chorus, the entire room was still, as though the world itself had paused to listen to a child singing to God. As the music swelled, Lila's voice carried across the hall like a wave of light. She sang with her eyes closed, her face tilted upward as if speaking directly to heaven. Every note seemed to pierce the silence, drawing hearts closer, softening even the hardest expressions in the crowd. A man who had come only out of curiosity found his chest tightening as tears blurred his vision. A woman in the back, worn down by years of sorrow, felt something awaken within her as the young girl's voice wrapped around her like a warm embrace. It was more than talent, it was purity, it was faith, it was love. Each lyric seemed to carry a message, a reminder that hope was still alive in a world often filled with pain. Lila's small hands clutched the microphone tightly, not out of fear but out of passion, as though she were holding on to the very thing keeping her spirit alive. Her parents sat in the front row, their hands entwined, trembling as they listened. For them, this was no ordinary performance. This was their daughter's promise fulfilled, her offering to God, her thank you for the love they had given her. The audience grew restless in the best way. Some whispering prayers, others wiping their eyes, unable to look away. When her voice reached its highest note, clear and unwavering, it felt as though the walls themselves were trembling under the weight of her song. The entire theater seemed to transform into a sanctuary, where strangers were united by the innocence of a child's heart. In that moment, the world outside didn't matter, no troubles, no worries, only a young girl's voice, rising higher and higher, like a fragile flame burning against the darkness. The moment that would forever change everything came without warning. Lila's voice had just soared into the highest note, the kind that sent chills through every listener, when suddenly her body shuddered. Her knees bent awkwardly, and for a split second, the audience thought it was part of the performance. Then the microphone slipped from her trembling hands and clattered loudly against the stage floor. A collective gasp filled the auditorium as she collapsed, her small figure crumpling under the spotlight's glow. Her mother screamed her name, her father surged forward, but for a frozen heartbeat the crowd could not move, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The music cut off abruptly, leaving only the echo of her last note lingering in the silence. Ushers and medics rushed toward her, their footsteps pounding across the wooden stage, but nothing could erase the image already seared into every eye, the child who sang like an angel, now lying still before them. People in the audience covered their mouths in shock, some praying aloud, others weeping uncontrollably as the reality of the moment struck them. Her parents broke past the security, collapsing to their knees beside her, clutching her hands, begging her to wake up. The air grew heavy with grief and disbelief, the kind that presses down so hard it feels impossible to breathe. Yet even in the chaos, there was something hauntingly beautiful in the silence she left behind. It was as if the heavens themselves had reached down to claim the song as their own, taking the little girl who had given her all. The stage that only moments before had been filled with music and light was now shrouded in sorrow, and the entire audience knew they had witnessed not just a performance, but the fragile end of a life that had touched them all. Her parents held her trembling hands as the medics surrounded her, their voices urgent, their movements quick, but all Lila could feel was the warmth of her mother's touch and the steady grip of her father's hand. Her breathing was shallow, her chest rising and falling like a fragile flame fighting against the wind. She blinked slowly, her eyes finding her parents through the blur of tears and bright lights. In the hush that fell between frantic voices, she whispered with a voice so faint it was almost lost, "Tell Mom and Dad. I sang it for them." The words were broken, but they carried a weight greater than any song. Her parents wept openly, their tears falling onto her cheeks, their hearts breaking while clinging to the final gift she had given. The audience, unable to look away, sat in reverent silence. Some bowed their heads, others clasped their hands in prayer, and many could not hold back the flood of tears. The medics worked desperately, but Lila's small body seemed to be letting go, as though she had already given everything she had to give. And perhaps she had. Her song had not been a performance, it had been a farewell, a love letter, a prayer wrapped in melody. As the moment stretched into eternity, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, her gaze softening, as if she could already see something beyond the stage lights. Her parents cradled her, whispering words of love, their voices breaking, but their hands never letting go. Then, with the last ounce of strength, she exhaled a breath so gentle it felt like a sigh of peace. The silence that followed was not empty, it was sacred. The girl who sang to Jesus had offered her final gift, leaving behind a moment no one in that room would ever forget. In the weeks that followed, the world came to know Lila's name. A recording of her final performance, captured by an audience member, spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions watched the fragile young girl, standing beneath the glow of the stage lights, pouring her heart into every note. They watched the way her voice lifted people to tears, and then the heartbreaking moment it fell silent forever. Yet it wasn't the tragedy that lingered, it was the love, the purity, the courage in her song. Churches replayed her performance during Sunday services, calling her a messenger of hope. Families gathered around screens, listening to her voice as if it carried answers to their deepest prayers. Strangers who had never known her found themselves praying for her parents, feeling as though they too had lost someone precious. Letters poured in from across the country and beyond, filled with gratitude, comfort, and stories of lives changed by the little girl who had sung to Jesus. Her parents, though shattered with grief, found strength in knowing her dream had reached farther than anyone imagined. They spoke of her not with despair, but with pride, reminding the world that their daughter's life, though brief, had been a shining light. And somehow, in the midst of sorrow, they began to heal, carried by the love of millions who had been touched by her voice. The stage that had once held her final song became a symbol of hope, a place where her memory lived on. For those who heard her, Lila became more than a girl who died too young, she became proof that even the smallest voice can echo through eternity. Her story reminded the world that love, faith, and kindness outlive us all, and that sometimes, a single song can change everything.